Kanui te mihi ki koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to the Wastewater Management Review Committee, Wednesday the 26th of August 2020. Welcome you all here, members of the committee, staff, members of the public, and really appreciate everyone's attendance. Now this is being live streamed on YouTube by video, so smile for the camera. And also speak clearly into your microphone, and one speaker at a time, please, for clarity. And please make sure that your mobile phones are switched to silent. It'd be great to start with a karakia. We have a karakia, please? Thank you, Mātari. Kia ora, thank you, Mātari. Apologies. We've got apologies from, Heidi Hughes for lateness, Councillor. Yep. And
Carlton Bidwa, he won't be in today.
He won't be in today at all, thank you. I think I understand why. And then, of course, Emma, get my glasses on. And of course, Edina is not here because she's no longer on the committee. So, any word on her replacement? Okay, thank you. Now we have Rangi Marie Kingi, who would like to speak to us in the public forum. So welcome, Rangi Marie, and you've got 10 minutes. And if you take less than 10 minutes, then there'll be time for questions. And I'm sure the members of the committee would like to ask questions if there is time available at the end. So we are in your hands. Thank you very much.
Testing. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Rangi Marie Kingi, and I'm just here to do a small presentation. I'd like to start today with my presentation, and I just acknowledge who's listening in, and that is the local Tauranga District Council, as well as our general public, and I'd also like to acknowledge other councils in the kōrero that I bring today. I'd like to start by quoting whakapapa, because that's the reason why I'm here. It's about guardianship, kaitiaki guardianship, and our whakapapa, ko Papatuanuku, Mother Earth, ahau ko Ranganui, our Sky Father, ko Tangaroa, God of the sea, ko Tāwhiri Mātia, God of the winds, ko Tāne Mahuta, God of the forest, ko Hinanui i te Pōa, the goddess of death. And I'm here today to just talk about the Waste Management Review Committee and some of the investigations that I do directly out in the community, because we do want to see some results that have been coming through from the committee as a review. And I would like to just talk about the Australian mangroves that are a waste of planting out in our estuaries at the moment. So how has this come about that we seem to be bringing in or part of an agreement with a group of Australians to bring in these Australian mangroves to be used and planted in our estuaries to address this waste management of water? How's this been happening for some time now? It's not working. I want to report that it's not working, and even the shellfish are not attracted, because the first sign that we would see is that these mangroves would attract native species, including aquatic life, including shellfish that attach to them, and this is not happening directly out in the swamplands in our estuaries where all these plants continue to be planted. So I think that the committee needs to start making some decisions, and we need more Māori researchers. It's not working. These committees for the council are not working. The council's affairs are corroded, as we can see coming through the media now, and we are here in the Millennium Age. It's time for a change, and I'd like to encourage more Māori researchers that are not Queen Elizabeth University appointed either, because this is part of the consequence of being under Queen Elizabeth's chemical companies, such as the council, such as the hospitals, and all the chemical waste that is coming through the wastewater management of this area. It's from the consequence still of the chemicals that are being used. And I was just reading through your agenda as well. About the options for further treatments. So those options, once again, are a colonial order of instructions that you're going to continue to use these chemicals. So, and I'd like to see, we need to do something more about this directly affecting our areas. As we had a karakia this morning by somebody who's talking about aroha, and this is not coming through and actioned by the council or these representatives representing our people as well. It's not happening. I'd also like to talk about the pipes that need to be removed that are still being used for all this sewage, for the human sewage and the chemicals being dumped still into the estuaries and into our waterways here. After looking at some of these pipes, it's apparent that the council has been involved in just replacing all these old pipes with new pipes to continue dumping that sewage. So that this behaviour needs to stop somewhere. So who directly is involved in all this? With the council too. We should start having a project that, on a project by project basis, that these pipes into the estuaries should be removed. At least work on some way of removing it, but we just continue to head in a direction that nobody gives a hoot here. So because of this happening, and the council just continuously, and all councils around New Zealand, and that's why I stood for the mayoral position for the Bay of Plenty areas, because there's a bigger picture happening alongside the debt that's come through of $500 million for this council and a near $1 billion for Auckland Council, Rotorua Council up to $300 million. Says that we need to just force a closure upon the councils, because we're not making gains like we should be environmentally. We're not getting ahead and advancing, and we never will, because you people have already got an agenda here in New Zealand, and we're seeing that also now with the man-made coronavirus as well that's been introduced. It's nothing but a land grab. It's nothing but an environment grab again. It's nothing but an immigration invasion. It's nothing but a sewage overflow again. So I'm here and I represent a course of justice, whether people like it or they don't. I represent the future, and I represent new Māori generations coming through, and I'm calling for a protection order for our people regarding a lot of these matters that's affecting our health, people's health, our children's health, and we can't even walk in some areas because of the amount of chemical actually even being sprayed in the parks, reserves. We cannot even walk in some of the estuary areas because the chemicals have been dumped there, and it affects your feet, and it gives people arthritis, and people are being attacked without realising it by the chemicals that you continue to dump. So I'm just calling for a course of justice. I'm calling for some matters, and I'd like to see more Māori researchers. And I won't be taking any questions here today either, because I'm in charge and I'm the boss. So thank you very much for that. That's the end.
Well, thank you. So you've finished early. You didn't want to take questions?
No,
okay,
I'm not taking any questions.
Thank you very much, Rangamario. Appreciate your presentation. And I'm sure if anyone has questions or comments, they can get in touch with you later.
Yes, they sure can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for that. Appreciate that. You're welcome to sit in on the rest of the meeting if you so wish.
I'll just, yep.
Yep, thank you. Thank you. Now, in terms of late items, I would like to just add a late item at the end under general business, and just to give a bit of a verbal update on the possibility of a co-chair for this committee. So I will move that we accept that as a late item. Would someone like to second that, please? Thank you,
I'll
Fiddy.
second it.
All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Welcome, Heidi. Good to see you. Thank you. There's no confidential business to be transferred into the open, and there's no need to change the order of business. So first item is confirmation of minutes, which was the last meeting we had, last official meeting we had was the 26th of February, 2020. So are there any corrections to those? No. So can I have a mover, please, that we accept those? Councillor Arbery, seconded by Fitty. Thank you. No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? I don't believe so. Thank you. So moving to business of the day, 8.1 is the Environmental Mitigation and Enhancement Fund Policy Manual Report. We have Radley here, so Radley, you can take us through. And but first of all, I just want to acknowledge the hard work that has gone into this whole project over many years, and the fact we've all had some very productive workshops prior to this meeting. So that was, for all those involved, really appreciate that. So thank you, Radley.
Thank you. So the first report is on the Environmental Mitigation and Enhancement Fund Policy Manual. So the draft has been looked at by the committee in a workshop, and some recommendations were made around how we might improve the document. Just to give you a recap, the fund policy manual, or the fund itself, is designed through the resource consent for the main discharge of from the Tamanga plant, to look at these three points. So it's around funding applications for projects around avoiding, remedying, mitigating actual or potential effects on the wastewater scheme, providing mitigation by way of environmental compensation, or enhancing the environment adversely affected by the wastewater scheme. So that's the reasoning, the purpose behind the fund itself. The main changes that to the original guidelines are around diverting or changing the stream into two streams. So we've got a project initiative stream, which talks around those projects that will attempt to fulfil the purposes that were up beforehand, and then we have an environmental compensation stream. So the project initiative stream, there in the policy manual we have eligibility criteria. So this is like any application to the fund must include at least one of these eligibility criteria. Then we have some information around an assessment panel that will assess those applications, the skills that assessment panel must have, and then some assessment criteria that the panel can compare applications against, in case then there is a need to prioritise or manage how much funding goes to which applications. The other stream is with direct negotiation with the review committee, and that was one of the changes we made to the original document. The next steps are around appointing that assessment panel. What we're looking at is using the City Technology Advisory Panel that was used for the City Heart program. So we'll call for expressions of interest, and then look at appointing a panel from there. We may use like a subcommittee of the committee to appoint that panel, with the idea of being able to open the fund for applications through January, March of next year. The panel will then review them in April, and we will, the committee will be able to approve applications for funding for the next financial year. That's pretty much it. If there's any questions around the document itself, I can either go through the changes that were made with the recommendations, if that's what people would like, or it can sit there.
Thank you. I think we were all in that workshop, so in terms of selecting the panel itself, what's the time frame for that, Bradley? When are you planning to put that together?
So the panel would need to be in place by April and know what they're doing to be able to review those applications. So we'll be looking to get the expressions of interest out pretty quickly. I'm looking at setting up terms of reference for that group based on that other advisory panel, and so that shouldn't take too long.
Thank you. So given that we probably want to have a couple of members on the selection panel for the assessment panel, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do we have any volunteers? I mean, I'd be happy to be on that. Mātaria, would you like to be on that as well? In terms of selecting the panel itself? Does anyone else have any idea, any objections to that? Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. So make a note of that. Thank you, Radley, and just let us know when those expressions of interest go out, and if you can give us all a copy of it, and just keep us up to date on that. Thank you very much. So we have the recommendations on page 18 to receive this report and then approve the adoption of the draft EMEF policy manual. Question? Sorry?
Thank you.
I just have a question on how does it get promoted? How do people find out about the?
So we can obviously let various institutions know, as well as advertising it. It's also up on the web, goes up on the website. Yeah, so there's various ways we can do that.
We can use our own social media networks.
Open to suggestions as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. So would someone like to move those recommendations? Mātari, thank you. Seconded by Heidi. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. And again, thanks everyone who's been involved in that process for quite a few years. Appreciate that. 8.2 is the 5-yearly monitoring, upgrade and technology review report. And again, Radley, you've authored this particular paper, and there'll be a presentation, so thank you.
Right, is in number 3 of the executive summary. I've talked about their staff response being included in the final report. Just with a delay on getting the cultural report completely finished, there's some recommendations that still need to come through into the table that I showed you at the workshop around the initial staff response to those recommendations. So that what will happen when the regional council have made their recommendations on the report, I will bring a report to committee with all the recommendations and how TCC sees us rolling out that response. So that's just the one change to that. The document itself, we had a workshop back in 2019, August 2019, where we looked at the draft technical report and some recommendations were made. And then from that point forward, we were working on the cultural report that sits alongside. Those recommendations have been included in the report recently and have now gone through into the final report for the committee to approve before it goes to the regional council. I can go through those, or I can just give you a brief summary.
Mr. Chair, through you, can I just ask really a quick question? In the executive summary number 3, you mentioned about some delays. What delays are those?
Sorry if I didn't make myself clear. So At the last workshop, we had an initial staff response to the recommendations that came through from the cultural report. I've written in this report here that I've included that response in the final report. That's not correct. It'll come to the committee at the next committee meeting. So rather than be included in the report at the moment, we'll get the recommendations, any recommendations from regional council as well, and then we can put them all together. So some of the additions to the final report include obviously the recommendations that have come through from the cultural report, some updates on things like landfill levies for biosolids, a discussion around high rate algal ponds that was identified in the cultural report as warranting a look at. We have some updates around the Regional Council's Natural Resources Plan, the addition of cultural legislative planning and governance framework. So one of the recommendations that came through from the cultural report was to have specific reference to and acknowledge those documents like iwi and Harbour management plans. Some updates to the Zero Carbon Act, and also around the Three Waters Review and the possibility that in future the wastewater management of Tauranga City will be potentially could be as part of a new utility over in the years to come. So that's pretty much it. Really, all we need now is for the committee to approve the report, so we can send it off to regional council.
Thank you. Did I see Christina? Hi, Christina's here. Welcome, Christine. Did you, because you're the main author of the report, is that right? I'm just wondering if you wanted to sort of give us some key, I guess, particularly in terms of new technologies, what's coming through in the last few years, or just from your perspective, any key points that we should be aware of?
So in terms of, I am the person who coordinated and pulled the report together, but the technical aspects were put together by Gary McDonald and John Crawford, who are not here today. The report, in terms of, I did update it and from the recommendations from the cultural report. And so some of that is, because it was written in August last year, some of the legislation has moved on. So I've included a section in there about the Three Waters reform, and also the Zero Carbon Act has come in and talked about the implications to do with that. In terms of new technologies, we've added in a bit of more of an explanation about high rate algal ponds and how they've performed around New Zealand, and also in terms of new technologies, I think Radley mentioned about the staff response, and so that would be if you wanted to explore new technologies beyond what's in there already. We have made a recommendation around biosolids and actually reviewing the Biosolids Strategy, because that is something that changes all the time. But it is really up to the committee as to how they want to work with staff to explore any new technologies.
Thank you. Thank you. So, in terms of our biosolids strategy, Wally, we're still on track. We haven't really made any big changes as a result of this report to our strategy, or are we still looking at specific several options, or we narrowed it down to one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are looking at some different options, and we're currently in the marketplace for a new contract for beneficial reuse of biosolids, and we hope to have a signed contract with that soon, and that will be removing all biosolids from landfill and going to beneficial reuse. So we're optimistic that that will come to pass very soon.
Through the chair, just a question. So does that mean then that the contract comes soon? How long does it, once you have that contract, how long does it take them to initiate, do you think? What kind of timeframes are we looking at?
It's practically immediate, because we already have an agreement with them to take 25% of the biosolids to the successful tenderer, and we're working with them at the moment through expanding that to be able to take 100%.
Wow, that's really good news.
So that was a trial that we entered into about 12 months ago. So for the last 12 months or so, we've been diverting about 25% of our biosolids from landfill anyway as a trial, and it's been very successful. So we're looking now to expand that further. And there's some, we'll come back to a report on that once we've got things lined up and signed.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, with us taking some of the waste from the Western Bay, what's the arrangement there in terms of, do they contribute maybe to the Southern Pipeline, or how do they contribute for that service?
Well, they pay the same user fees and charges as anyone else, so we invoice them monthly for all of the wastewater that comes through. So there's flow meters on the, so we measure volumetrically what comes from Te Puna and Omokoroa, and we invoice them monthly for those flows. So we've got full cost recovery.
Sorry, could I
Sure.
sorry, through the chair, I just wanted to add to that, and sort of following on the new technologies aspect. Obviously, with one of the reasons that we haven't got the staff response in the document at the moment is because it should be an evolving document, and it should be something that comes to the committee, regularly to see how we're doing on it. And we've got a number of work streams coming on to the committee in the next workshop or two around the infrastructure plans going ahead, so that'll fit in nicely there. But yes, certainly some of the recommendations as well will need continuous updating around cultural monitoring, how we go about implementing some of those and that kind of thing. So,
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mātari?
Thank you, Radley. Yes, she answered my question, because I note that there's a few recommendations in the MERTA report as well as the cultural paper. So I'm sort of, don't have to give me an answer straight away, but I suppose I'm sort of thinking what would be the process moving forward.
So we would be looking to bring that initial whole response to the committee, prioritise which streams that you want to look at first, and possibly suggest some avenues that we could progress some of those things like cultural monitoring and discussions with the Manaki research and that.
Yeah, that raises a very good point, Mātari. How do we kind of keep on top of monitoring all of these recommendations? Is there like a standard sort of template that you can report back to us every 3 or 6 months?
A bit like what I do with the wastewater activities report, I'll bring a matrix of those recommendations to the committee, and we can go through where we've had progress, so that there's a continual review of them.
Thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind, Rangamaria, just keeping it low, thank you. Now, are there any other queries or questions on this particular report? It's very comprehensive, very thorough. Yako?
Yeah, happy to move.
So that's on page 33. We're receiving the report and then approving the report to be submitted to the Bay Plenty Regional Council. So moved by Councillor Arbery, seconded by Whitty. Any discussion? Thank you, Yako.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think it's always good to read that we have very high levels of compliance with all our consents, and technology improvements that have been done with the Southern Pipeline, allowing us to flow balance quite well, is really a good news story, and I think the Regional Council will gladly receive this report, and hopefully it's a rubber stamp process.
Excellent, thank you very much. Any other comments? Thank you. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you again, staff, for that, and also Katrina. Did I get that right? Katharina. Sorry. Christina, sorry. Sorry. That's terrible. It was a long day yesterday, so I'll blame that. Yeah, I've got it in both ears. Okay, right, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving to 8.3, the wastewater activities update report, and Radley again is in the hot seat. Thank you, Radley.
Thank you. So, yeah, just wanted to give some updates on some of the work streams that we've been forging ahead with and some of the projects that are ongoing. So I'll give some brief updates on the final effluent pipeline at Tamanga, desludging of Pond 1, seepages report that we do on an annual basis, and then those infrastructure plans and modelling projects, the guidelines for wastewater overflows, and then the landward and marine section of the outfall. So the final effluent pipeline upgrade is still on track. It has been pushed back slightly to October 2020. We're just waiting on the final connections to the treatment plant, but all the pipeline itself is finished. And that should be operational, as I say, sort of end of October. The desludging of Pond 1, currently what we're trying to do with the tender has still got to go out for that project. We're looking at ways we can include methodologies around minimising seepage during the desludging. You may remember that as we've desludged the pond previously, we've seen a rise in seepages due to the very nature of desludging is sort of removing the material that is keeping the seepages low, so, or has formed a seal as such at the bottom of the pond. So we're looking at ways we can do the desludging while keeping those that sort of process as minimal as possible. One of the constraints that we're looking at and sort of is delaying the potential start of that project is around the trenching material required to dispose the sludge that is taken out of the pond on the closed landfill. So we need quite a large amount of clean fill material to build the trenches, and although we have some of that, we're currently looking at options around securing some more.
If anyone would like to ask any questions as we go through, is there just a quick question from me? If I remember rightly, the longer the sludge settles there, the easier it is for us to actually desludge it. Is that right? There was some advantage in a slight delay, if I remember rightly.
So the longer the sludge matures in the pond, then the more easier it is to get it out, thicken it, and dispose of it. When it's new, it's very light, and yeah, just is much more difficult to completely remove. So by leaving it to mature in there, it'll actually be an easier process of getting it out. It doesn't really affect the the constraints we're running up against with trying to minimise the seepages, but yeah. So every year we do a seepages report. This is our 5-yearly review of those reports, and we're just waiting for the final version of that to come through at the moment, so I'll bring it to the committee when we do have it. But I just wanted to give you an update on what was happening with the seepages over the last little period since we finished the desludging last time. So you'll see that the peaks on the right hand side are when we were desludging last time, so that's when we finished sort of March 2019, and we've seen a rapid decrease in seepages after that time, which is heartening to see, seeing as we're no longer putting sludge in the pond itself. So we've still had that sort of sealing of the seepage tracks through the boundary. What I also wanted to discuss with you was that we've had some work done on obviously as the tide comes up, we get infiltration from the harbour into those seepages, and it's quite interesting to see that quite a portion of the seepages that we've been monitoring are actually that seawater coming back out at low tide, because obviously we monitor the seepages at low tide. So that we're seeing that salt water come back out, and that's actually adding to the flow of those. The 5-yearly report that the committee just approved had some recommendations around the monitoring of the seepages and Te Teko that's part of that seepage consent, and also some recommendations in the cultural report as well. So that'll be something we'll look to progress pretty quickly if we can. So I mentioned prior about the mitigation methodologies we're looking at for the desludging. One of those that we're looking at currently would be around putting some sheet piles into the boundary that would drive the groundwater further down and reduce the seepages coming through. That's something that potentially could be, doesn't have to be just a temporary option for the desludging, could actually improve the seepages going forward as well. And we're looking at ways we can get that going as quickly as we can. So just wanted to, obviously, if that's something that that's felt is feasible, we'll bring it to committee again. No questions on that? Okay. So, yep.
So the reason for doing that would be just to improve our environmental performance, because currently we're still well below resource consent limits, so that's sort of a above and beyond measure that you're looking at?
Yes, so currently we've been below the rate of seepage that is in the consent. Obviously there's an issue around any sort of seepages into the harbour, and so it would not only improve that rate, the idea is that it would improve that rate, but because you would have an extension of the time that the groundwater is not coming into the harbour, there could be potentially some improvement in the nutrients that are coming through as well. That's what we've been discussed with us. So yeah, it would improve the rate, and it potentially could also improve the level of various contaminants in the groundwater.
The pond one, that's the one up for decommissioning, isn't it? We're having a workshop on that, a further workshop. Yes.
Next we have the draft 30-year wastewater infrastructure plan. So we've got this in draft form at the moment, and it will feed into the LTP discussions that are upcoming. Key drivers are around making sure that the infrastructure plans for Tamanga, this is the Tamanga infrastructure plan, I should say, and I guess one of the key drivers is making sure that we've got the right upgrades going on at the right time, got the right time frame in. This will be coming to the committee at the next workshop. I'm very hopeful that we'll have it on the 24th of September, but as I say, with LTP workshops happening as well, it may get pushed back slightly. We also have, at that workshop, we'll also have a discussion around the other infrastructure plan, which is the network plan, and that's what the wastewater strategic modelling is looking at. And it's focused on the network and using, at the moment we're using a base 5 times dry weather flows to create our peak wet weather flows, and the impacts that may have on various parts of the network. But over time, that model will start to include, rain event data and become much more, I suppose, specific about the flows going through the network and where those pinch points might be, what we can use the network for in terms of storage and that kind of thing. So we'll be bringing that to the next workshop as well. Any questions on those two?
So a question from me. We've been talking about potentially solar drying our biosolids as one potential sort of next step process. Is there room on the site for that? I mean, I can see some space there, but just wondering, is that likely to be on the site?
Do you want to answer that, Willie? Or?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the site just to the south there, you can see the green paddock at the bottom, is where that was proposed to go. We're reviewing that in light of us being able to have beneficial reuse of our biosolids through the existing contract that we're seeking. It may defer that for quite a few years, and hopefully technology will move along and we may never have to build something that big. But we will certainly be pushing it out because we're going for a 10-year contract. So I'm hoping that we can push the solar dryer out beyond the 10 years within the existing LTP. But we still have to go through that process internally first and bring it back to you. But that's what we would dearly love to do because it saves us a lot of capex.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I guess I'm only raising it because this is a 30-year wastewater infrastructure plan. So even if there was a sort of a potential area, this is where it might go. Just for would be helpful, I think.
Yes, and we'll ring fence that area. Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to give a quick update on the regional best practice guidelines. I presented to the Rangipu Manawhenua group at the end of July. That was part of our discussions around getting more input from iwi and hapu around how they would like to be notified of these overflows. The general response was that the notification protocol we currently have is working well, but the 2 points were around they were keen to get notifications of not just overflows that went to water, but also to land, and also to have some further discussion around how cultural impacts could be included in some of the follow-up that we currently do for those overflows. Just as an aside, we had I had to do the annual report for the regional council the other day, and over the financial year from July 2019 to June 2020, we had I think it was 87 overflows that went either to land or water, and of those 87, 15 could have potentially made a waterway. So in total, blockages were around 150. So we had 83 that were contained within the wastewater network itself. We were notified early enough that we could get there and clear the blockage prior to any discharge. Then we had another similar amount that were contained to land, whether that be on private property or within the roading network or a park or something like that. So yeah, so about 10% of those potentially made either a stormwater pond or a waterway.
So in terms of the blockages, a couple of questions. How have those tracked over time, and how effective was the Wipes Block Pipes campaign? And is there other ways to pick those up earlier? I don't know if there's some sort of flow monitoring instruments and alarms you can put on your SCADA, or if you can throw Pi over SCADA to monitor trends and spot those things, or is it gravity pipes where you can't really get those sorts of sensors in?
I might answer the first bit and then get Ollie to talk about monitoring. So yeah, so we generally have somewhere in the region of 100 to 150 blockages a year. So the number of blockages remains fairly static, or within that range. What we're finding is that we are definitely having less wet wipes. I guess what we're trying to do, our contractor is trying to do, is to decide what is the primary cause of the blockage. A lot of these blockages will all have fat associated with them, and they're whether it's wet wipes and fat, or tree roots and fat, or fat on its own. It's quite a subjective thing, but we do seem to be getting a reduction in wipes as the primary reason for the blockage. But as I say, that number of overflows and blockages has remained pretty static. In terms of trying to find where they are and preempt them, we have a small number that of areas where we know we potentially can have problems, and we monitor those through CCTV and flushing on a regular basis until such time as there may be some sort of upgrade or replacement of the pipes, if, for example, we've got a dip in the line or something like that. But they're quite a small number. Generally what we find are these blockages are in new places. We're not getting them on a recurring basis. And some of the reason for the regional guidelines and the annual reporting is so that not only us but the regional council can see that we're actually we're not getting them in the same places all the time. And if we are, we're doing something about it rather than just waiting till the next time. Wally, did you want to talk about some of the work that's been done around potentially, preempting through flow monitoring?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're certainly, so Radley mentioned we've got the static model built at the moment, so for wet weather flows, peak flows, and we're gradually validating that model to become a model that is a truly dynamic model for wet weather flows and peak flows. With that, we've had to do a whole lot of flow gauging throughout our network on multiple sites, and that showed up some areas of concern where we do have, because it measures velocity and depth within the pipe. So through that process, we've found some pipes that are running more full than they should be. So there's something in there impeding some of that flow. So there's obviously that technology is available, and we've also been working with some providers through the Internet of Things, measuring depths of water in manholes. Where we've got shallow manholes and there's not much room for surcharge or for water to back up, we've got sensors built into them, and that comes through the Internet of Things rather than through our SCADA, because that's a little bit more complex to get into. We've been doing some trials with that. They've been quite successful. The issue is getting the signal in some of the very low-lying areas, finding a signal that's reliable. So Brian Everett's been doing some good work on that. He's a very clever engineer that loves all the techo stuff. And so we're doing the flow gauging, the level gauging, and all of that is giving us better information around where we may get potential overflows. And as Radley says, there's no trend of getting an overflow, particularly from that pipe all the time or that pipe all the time, because whenever we do get one, we'll go and CCTV the line, and if we find roots or deformed pipes or anything like that, or cracking, we'll replace the line. So, we're proactively, we're responding very quickly whenever we find these things, if there is a fault in the network as well.
I'm just wondering about, is there any intention to do a similar kind of project like you did around the wipes on fat?
Yep, that's in the pipeline.
I might just add to that, it's a really difficult one because, again, it's a lifestyle thing. And some of the grey hairs around the room might remember, when Mum used to cook and fry anything, the dripping would stay in the pan or in the your pot or whatever that you're cooking with, and it would be reused. Nowadays, there's a lot of prepared foods, and it's already pre-cooked or pre-fried, and so we're getting a lot more fat in our diet and a lot more fat going down. And whenever anybody does any cooking these days, it's generally with cooking oil, and so it gets rinsed out with the hot tap down. But of course, fats, oils and greases, the only differentiation between a fat and an oil and a grease is the temperature at which it hardens and the degree to which it hardens. So the increased use of cooking oils and the prepared foods and fast foods has generally increased the level of fat within our sewers dramatically to what it was, say, 30 or 40 years ago.
But I think the comment that you can never win this kind of battle on one front only. You know, you've got to have an education piece. You've got to have the smart technology piece. You got to, you know, you got to look at your infrastructure. There's a whole lot of elements, and I think that's what we're trying to pick off together. Yeah.
Would you believe it? We have someone live streaming, and they've sent through a question. And it's how many litres per day are leaking into the harbour at the moment? I imagine that's from the seepage pond.
The seepage, yep. So if I go backwards, there we go.
Was that 40 cubic metres? Oh, that's consent.
So that last sampling there was, I think from memory, it was around 8 cubic metres per day. So the rate that's in the consent, I believe, is just over 40. Yeah. 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 So over this, I'll add to that while we're here. So over this time, we'd finished desludging, but we also had some very, very dry weather for a period of months. So we had very low levels of water in the pond as well, which undoubtedly helped. So that's one of the things we're also looking at doing as part of the desludging is monitoring the level of the pond over that period to enable us, if we can, to reduce the level of water if needed. So we're looking at as many different mitigation methods as we can while we undertake that.
Probably should clarify this. This isn't raw sewage. What sort of water is this?
So this is water that's been through the entire treatment process of the Tamanga wastewater treatment plant. So it's high, what would be termed in the industry as high quality effluent, and the steps after the pond are for it to go through a wetland and then through the UV system prior to being discharged out in the harbour. So it has been through a tertiary, or it has been through 3 levels of treatment prior to that through the treatment plant. So just a final couple of updates on the landward and the marine sections of the outfall and the work streams going on there. So we are still finalising the construction management plan for the landward upgrade. Once that is finalised, we will begin our community engagement around those works. The one piece of work that has been done is we were CCTVing the final piece of the landward section that goes from just south of Maranui to the beach manhole. The reason for CCTVing that was to look at the potential for relining that as part of the landward upgrade project. My understanding is that there was nothing that was shown that would inhibit us doing that. So,
And through the chair, there was talk about talking with and I'm not sure whether it was this piece or not, about the opportunities for something like a cycle path to go in at a similar time. Was that this piece, and has that been discussed? Or
I believe there was talk around a walkway. Yep. So I think that's still up for discussion. Yeah. You may remember at a previous workshop, we had a briefing from Jane around where we were at with the marine outfall review and the planning that had been going on. We'd come through to a long and short list options, but it had, I guess, come to the conclusion that we would be better off looking at using an indicative business case framework. That piece of work has really only just begun. It'll end up identifying those long and short list options like we had previously, but it will give us that confirmation that we were heading in the right direction about that. We'll be coming to the next workshop with a briefing around that indicative business case model, and where the committee can feed into that and give input at various stages, so that we are making sure that those recommendations are included as we go through it. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, Radley. Any other questions from members? I think you've covered all of the aspects very well and thoroughly, so thank you, Radley. Would someone like to move that we receive Radley's report? Mātari, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Arbery. In discussion, I'll put that. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So thank you very much. That concludes the business. Now we just on to the late item. And Mātari, you mentioned to me a couple of months ago now the possibility of a co-chair position for this committee. And I just wanted to let everyone know that I've put a formal request through to Democracy Services to prepare us a report as to what that might look like. And that will, I think eventually will have to go to council for ratification, but that will come to this committee first of all in October, I believe. So we are making progress. I note in one of the meeting protocols of when this whole committee was set up, I'll just read a little bit out to you. The review committee shall establish its own meeting protocols having regard to the customary practices of the tangata whenua of Tauranga Moana, and shall operate in accordance with the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, especially the principles of consultation, active participation and partnership. So I think the prospect of a co-chair lines up quite nicely with that. So we will bring a report in October and make progress after that. So thank you for bringing that up, Mātari. I think that concludes all of the business of the day. Appreciate everyone coming and participating. And if we can finish with a closing karakia, please. Thank you. Amini. Thank you very much, Mātari. Thank you, everyone. And as usual, there's some kai normally, isn't there? Then we finish early. Is it here early? Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.